I was physically broken, I was mentally broken, I'd been in and out of hospital with liver-related illnesses because of the extent that I was drinking, and the doctors were like, the last time I went in, when I was having a checkup actually for my face, they were just like, "You're not well, man. You're not going to be here in a year if you continue to do what you're doing."
Welcome to Imposters, the show where I have revealing conversations with world-class execs, athletes, and entertainers about their personal challenges and how overcoming those challenges has shaped their careers and lives for the better. I'm your host, Alex Lieberman, co-founder and executive chairman of Morning Brew. My guest today is Tom Gozney. Tom is the founder of Gozney, one of the market-leading pizza oven brands and maker of the Roccbox, the world's first portable home pizza oven. What started as a shabby handmade pizza oven in Tom's own backyard has since grown into a business that today is valued at over $120 million. Before Tom became a groundbreaking product designer and entrepreneur, he was a lost kid struggling with a learning disability. The one thing Tom felt good at as a teenager was drinking and being wild, which led him down a harrowing road of addiction and trauma before he was even 21. Today, Tom is an inspiring example of how, even in the depths of substance abuse, a person can completely turn their life around. My full conversation with Tom Gozney right after this quick break. Staying hydrated is one of the simplest ways that you can take care of yourself and your health. It can also be one of the first things to become an afterthought when your focus gets pulled away. Action ion-charged alkaline water can make it easier and more enjoyable to keep up with hydration. Action water goes through a multi-stage purification and filtration process to ensure it's at peak quality. Action water is at a 9.5 pH level or higher at the time of bottling. Plus, there are electrolytes added for taste with no sodium added. Learn more at drinkaction.com. That's drinkaction.com. Tom Gozney, thank you so much for joining Imposters.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man.
Well, you have created an amazing brand that's, now valued at 9 figures, and you've designed and created this revolutionary product that's changing restaurants, changing home kitchens around the world. But to me, as fascinating as the story of the success of your business is your upbringing and how you got to where you are today. So can you share what the story was of your early life?
Yeah, of course, man. So I was born into a really loving, caring family. Lived on the south coast of England in quite a rural, beautiful but quite sleepy town. And I couldn't have wanted for anything more as a young kid. We lived in a nice area. I had great neighbours. We played as little kids. I think going to school was where the initial challenges in my life began. I don't, I'm quite dyslexic, and so when I went to school, I went to a private school in the UK. It was a really good school. My parents sort of worked hard to send me there, but I really didn't flourish in the classroom environment. I found it really difficult to concentrate. I didn't interact like the other children in the class, and I think 30 odd years ago, dyslexia wasn't as well known as it is today, obviously, and the education system has changed somewhat now. So going to school was I think a major frustration for me. I didn't understand why I wasn't flourishing like the other kids and doing as well as the other kids. And lightly got bullied when I was really young, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And I think that combination of the two, the sort of lack of self-esteem through not being brilliant in school and then being lightly bullied, really impacted me, my mental health and my well-being. And it's when I started to essentially act out, and acting out with negative behaviors got me attention with other kids in the school, and I started to become more popular. And I think that that desire for attention, right, and popularity was what started to lead, because I wasn't winning in school. So, and then it got progressively worse. My behavior, as I got more and more attention for negative behavior, my behavior got worse. Everything got leveled up a little bit. And then by the time I'd left my first school at the age of sort of 12 or 13, I'd become a really, really naughty kid. I became someone that I truly wasn't. So I never felt at home anywhere. And I built that persona around misbehaving. And then when I found a group of lads outside of school that were doing drugs, instantly it gave me comfort, and I felt right at home, right? It was just like those insecurities and those elements in my life were filled, and I found like, essentially it felt like I found my purpose at the age of 13 or 14, found smoking weed, found a group of lads that were also naughty, and we like bonded. I had community, and I felt like I'd found my crew, right? And like I said, we were living in quite a rural area, and smoking weed quite quickly escalated onto much harder drugs. And probably by the age of like 14 or 15, we were taking class A drugs. And then it was just full force, right? It became, destructive really, really quickly. And, we were sort of living for getting messed right up and going out and going wild. And that was sort of the beginning of my journey into drug addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah, you talk about that. Your parents worked really hard to put you into private school, that you were brought up in, generally a strong family. How aware was your family around all of this?
Yeah, so my parents clearly knew, when I was entering into my early teenage years, that there was like changes in my behavior, right? And I think one of the biggest factors to this were literally when I found drugs, and when I found these group of guys that I hang out with. All of a sudden, you build this bravado, you build this external persona that like, this is who I am. Who the fuck are you? Like, stop talking to me like that. Do you know, all that stuff?
Yeah.
And so, there was this like, false sense of confidence as a young guy that I've found my people. You're not my fucking family. Do you know? It's like this like rebellious nature, and I just purely through frustration, low self-esteem, all of that stuff. And mum would try and talk to me about smoking weed. She knew I was doing it, and I'd be like, I'm just normal. I'm a normal kid. What are you going on about? Just get off my back, and it creates this divide. And actually, even through to when I went to treatment and went to rehab, like, I had absolutely zero comprehension of the severity of the denial that I went through around my addiction. And I hadn't even really started heating up at that point with my mum. Like, mum was like, it's not normal to smoke. It's not normal to smoke weed. I think this, like, mum trying to, like, educate me and protect me just drove a divide, right? And then, my dad drank a little bit when we were younger. And so there was a natural divide between me and my dad. Like, addiction runs through the family from my dad's side. And my dad was never a bad dad. He was a loving, caring, brilliant dad, but alcohol was present, right? Always. And it affected the way that he interacted, and stuff like that. And so I think that was really real, right? Like, you get to the point where you're like 13, 14, and like, you're not going to tell me not to drink. Like, I've been around drink in the house since I was a kid. And so that just drove a divide. And I think as soon as the divide between me and my family started, it was just like there was no turning back, right? Like, behavior went wild, drug taking escalated. I was certainly not listening to anyone at home that would try and give me guidance or mentorship or anything like that, right? And so it just became more and more in depth and more real and more, much more destructive.
Tom's substance abuse became a toxic cycle. He got expelled from multiple secondary schools and kicked out of college as well. He started using Class A drugs every day and took on an identity of being a wild partier that he was proud of. He says that it felt like something of a badge of honor as a teen. And so for Tom, the only way he was going to break his addiction was a truly jarring and life-changing wake-up call.
I got scared once. I got into trouble. I got scared with the police. It was more serious than any other times that I've been in trouble with the police before, and it scared me. And, for the first time ever, I was like, right, I'm gonna cut down my using. I'm gonna cut down using drugs, and I'm gonna stop drinking. I'm gonna moderate how I do it. I'm gonna party on the weekends or whatever. And it was this moment in my life that it was like, I tried to stop, and I was like, right, I'm gonna put it to the side. And like, actually, my using just got progressively worse. It was like, it was wild. It was like this conscious decision to not do it, and then I was doing it like 10x. It was like, I didn't think it could get worse, but it was like, I was sort of saying when I was chatting to one of my friends recently about it, it's like, it was like dieting, like fad diets, right? You're starting a diet on Monday, so you binge heavily for the weekend because your diet's starting on Monday. And it was almost like that mentality. It was like, okay, it's going to stop on Monday, so I'm going to go harder. And actually, Monday would come, get like 2 hours of sobriety, and then go and have a beer, and then it would be off and running again for another month, you know. And so I guess that was the biggest realization. It wasn't my rock bottom, but the biggest realization at the age of about 18, that I was an addict. Like, I was all out, like I could not stop, and when I tried to stop, it got worse. And so that was the first time that I really realized as a young adult that I had a problem, like a significant problem. Before that, I didn't know. I just thought I was like everybody else, but I just chose to be wild because that was my persona and my identity.
How much did it scare you coming to the realization that no matter what you did at that point, you were addicted to the point where like you proved to yourself you couldn't stop it?
Yeah, I mean, it was petrifying, right? And I think the way that I dealt with the fear of it was just to use. And so there was this sort of new emotional aspect to my addiction where I was like out of control. I was trying to control it. It was so scary that I couldn't, that it just forced me to use to forget about it even more. So it's this sort of like self-perpetuating cycle that just
Yep.
seemed like there was no end, right? And I, I guess I was fortunate at the time. It probably didn't seem fortunate, but one evening, I was out in a local town, and I was I was sort of jumped by a group of guys. Like, one guy sort of walked past me in the street and barged into me with his shoulder, and I was drunk, I was using, I was out. And I sort of turned around and be like, "What the fuck are you doing, mate?" You know, as you do when you're in that world. And I'm just like, he was clearly looking for a fight, and he started on me. And little did I know there was like seven of his mates around the corner, and this is what they were looking for. That they were looking for trouble. And I quite frankly, I got the shit kicked out of me, man. I had all my teeth knocked out the bottom of my mouth, my eye socket smashed, my skull was cracked. They nearly killed me. And that was a moment. That was a proper moment in my life. I picked my teeth up off the pavement. I remember when they left me alone, I picked like four teeth up off the pavement, put them in my pocket, went to hospital. In hospital, they put the teeth back in my mouth, and they said that the bone might reform or something like that if they put them back in my mouth. So I had these loose teeth that were sat on my nerve endings. I came out of hospital the next day. I couldn't close my mouth. Like, my bite was on these teeth that were sat on my nerve endings. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. And man, the trauma, you know, yeah, I mean, the trauma that I endured with that specific um, event was real for me. I'd never experienced anything like it, and I was petrified. I was scared of going out. And then this time, with the trauma of this event, my
Yep.
using just went up a notch again. And I was to the point where I was waking up in the morning, drinking, using drugs, like before I'd even scratched my head, right? And I remember I used to. Oh, it's wow, it's making me stress thinking about it. Um, like waking up in the morning, just so upset, so sad, so lonely, like crying, not wanting to use, and just drinking, and it just numbing everything and feeling like a sense of relief from getting away from it. But this cycle, man, it was wild. And so after I'd got attacked, I probably spent 2 to 3 months where I was just waking up to drink to oblivion. And and I think it just, like, the reality of my situation was just real, right? It was just like there was no hiding from it. And I was physically broken, I was mentally broken. I'd been in and out of hospital with liver related illnesses because of the extent that I was drinking. And the doctors were like, the last time I went in, when I was having a checkup actually for my face, they were just like, "You're not well, man. You're not going to be here in a year if you continue to do what you're doing." And so, like, mixture, I think, of being attacked, the reality of this, like, Groundhog Day of using to oblivion, and coming up for like brief moments of air, mixed with like health challenges. It was just like, I'm just fucking done, man. I'm out. I'm tapping out. Um, that was like the culmination of my rock bottom.
After hitting rock bottom, Tom reached out to his mom, who had been waiting for the day that he was ready to make a change. Together, they researched a rehab facility in South Africa, far from the friends who Tom was afraid he might contact to escape the challenges of recovery. Tom says the program was transformative for him. Unlike other rehab programs he'd been to previously, this one focused on getting to the root of the addictive behaviors, and it was there that he finally committed himself to a life of sobriety. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll hear about how Tom started his wildly successful pizza oven business, so stay with us. Hey everyone, Alex here. I want to tell you all about something healthy and nutritious that I tried recently. It's called AG1, and one delicious scoop every day can give you a massive boost. I like that it's made of 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and adaptogens because they can support so many aspects of your health. AG1 was designed for your active lifestyle, whether that includes a marathon podcast sesh or an actual marathon. Just stir it into a glass of water and go. It's dairy-free and vegan, and a subscription costs less than $3 a day. After trying it myself, I can see why AG1 has over 7,000 five-star reviews. Athletic Greens is giving away a 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 travel packs for free with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/imposters. That's athleticgreens.com/imposters. It's hard to feel your best during the day when you're not sleeping your best at night. So I want to tell you about a soft and firm mattress that will help you get the sleep that you need to be your best self. Purple mattresses have a gel flex grid that instantly adapts to your movements and keeps you cool all night long. But don't take my word for it. You can experience what a Purple night's sleep can be like at a showroom near you. You could also try it out for yourself with fast, free shipping and 100-night no-pressure trial. Become an overnight success with a Purple mattress. Learn more at purple.com. That's PURPLE.com. And we're back. Before the break, Tom told the story of his struggles with drugs and alcohol and how hitting rock bottom was what finally drove him to seek help. And though he finally found a healthier way of living through rehab, he didn't have a strong idea of what was next for him. So you went to rehab, you went through the program, and then upon leaving rehab, one of the things I understand from your story is that you had this feeling of being lost. And I can imagine why you felt that. Like, as you just mentioned, a large part of why you drank and why you used was as a coping mechanism for your own, pain or lack of self-confidence and self-love. But now that you no longer had this after rehab, how did you find a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of self-love?
Yeah, I mean, it's, couldn't be more right. That sort of sense of community and purpose that addiction delivered to me was completely stripped from me, right? And coming out of treatment, and even treatment was an incredible process, but it was a bubble, right? I was literally within 4 walls with counselors, with other people. It wasn't the real world. Whilst it gave me the foundations and I spent a long time in treatment, it was like the real work started on the outside, right? Like traveling back to England, being on the same streets that I was when I was using and having the same friends. And so I'm not going to lie, it was like an incredibly vulnerable time for me. And where I was so young, Alex, I was 21 years old when I came out of treatment, and there was like this core closer group of friends that I was using with, and then the sort of wider group were just warming up to partying, right? Like we'd gone hard when we were young, but like the wider social circle, they were just finding and going out clubbing and doing all this stuff. So the world was, I'd retired well beyond well before my years, and like everyone around me was just warming up to it. And so that was really difficult. And so, when I came out, I ignored the advice of the counselors, and I was just like, I am not going to be the 21-year-old guy that's socially isolated, that's cut off from a world of normality because I choose not to drink or do drugs. So, quite quickly, I was going out to drum and bass events. I was going out with my friends that were using drugs, and what a wild position to put myself in. It was just, really stupid. And then I quickly realized after 2, 3, 4 times doing it, it just wasn't fun being the sober guy out at a rave when everyone's like hanging out their arse, getting drunk, hanging off your shoulder, telling you how inspirational you are because you're not getting smashed every 3 minutes of the night. It was just like, oh my goodness, get me out of here. This is legit like the worst place I've ever been. And so it didn't take long for my sober clubbing days to end. It was very, very short lived. But there was a true sense of vulnerability, and continuing on from that theme of not wanting to be socially isolated, I started entertaining friends in my backyard. We started doing barbecues, and I still didn't want to tell friends not to bring beers around and stuff like that. But truthfully, in the early days of my recovery, I was so vulnerable, and like even having alcohol around me was so difficult, but I didn't tell any of my friends that. There was this amazing process that happened, right, about community. There was this incredible, it was almost like building a ritual around making food and cooking for people and entertaining. It was like I found it as like sort of sharing love, you know, like cooking for people, feeding people. You could share happiness and joy through food, right? And it brought community together. So that started in my house, but friends were still drinking around me and whatnot. But the ritual of preparing food and, you know, deciding what you're going to make, going to do the shop, I found it like therapeutic in the preparation. And then I found that sense of community through feeding people. It gave me purpose, and it gave me a sense of belonging, that I could be busy. If I felt awkward or I felt vulnerable, I could be like running around chopping this, doing that, and it sort of gave me a little bit of escapism from the social situation, whilst allowing me to be social. And then one evening, this was so poignant for me. One evening, I'd cooked like a group of my closest friends' pizzas, and I made dough, I made all the toppings, and we were like, let's cook them in the conventional oven. And there was something phenomenal around that because, you know, I proved the dough, made the dough, and everyone stretched and opened their own pizza. We did a little YouTube tutorial, Jamie Oliver, a little video on how to make dough, and what sort of captured me was amazing is that everybody got involved. We all stood around the worktop in the kitchen, opened our pizzas. It was personal. You could customize it. You were proud of your creation. Put it in the oven. The downside was we cooked it in the conventional oven in the kitchen. And they came out soggy. They weren't crispy. They were a bit shit. And whilst the process was really fun, the outcome was not great. And I literally said to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, Laura, I was just like, we need a pizza oven for the garden. That was legit, like so fun. And I was flat broke at the time, man. I was like laboring for a friend's business, installing solar panels. And Laura was just like, you cannot buy a pizza oven for the house. And I looked online and they were like £3,000 up for a kit, importing a kit from Italy. No one was doing them then. And I was like, wow, that's so expensive. So I sort of pitched to Laura that evening that we ate pizzas that I could do it for a couple of £100 and I could build a brick oven and I was going to do it myself. And so literally the next morning, 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, I was out in the garden digging foundations to build this plinth to build my own pizza oven. And
What year was that?
That was 2009. So I went to rehab in 2007. I spent just shy of a year in rehab in South Africa. I sort of came out in 2008. I tried to move into doing property development. It was sort of 2009 that I threw myself into cooking and food, and it was a year that we built the pizza oven. And then the most magical thing happened, Alex, man. It was like this like vulnerability that I'd never shared with anyone about drinking in my proximity and all of that stuff. It was like a real thing for me, and I was finding it really, really difficult. And then we built this pizza oven in the garden, and it ended up costing me thousands of pounds. And my wife was pissed with me. She was like, you know, I said it was going to be a couple of hundred. We weren't cash rich. And I ended up spending probably about £1,300 on building this. You know, I would love to say in this story that it was like this beautiful brick oven in the garden, but it was like horrendously ugly. It was this like horrible rendered, like it was really unattractive. But the most amazing thing happened. Lit the oven for the first time and saw a pizza cook in 60 seconds, you know, like we rolled out the dough, cooked a pizza next to the fire, and it was just like, holy shit, it was the most mesmerizing experience for me. Like, it was so primal, right? It was like outdoors, it was sensory, it was connected to nature. The smell of smoke, being in the fresh air, just detached me from reality. I forgot about life, forgot about my problems, and just completely connected with the process of cooking with fire. But then the fucking magic was insane. It was like we started throwing pizza sessions, And out of nowhere, all of my friendship group just stopped bringing beers and started bringing toppings. Like the oven
It's
captured
amazing.
everyone. The oven captured everyone, man. And it was like, it gave enough substance to our social environment that people didn't need to drink. And it was like sort of by divine wood-fired intervention that like alcohol gets stopped being brought around my house, man. It was insane. And it captured me, man. It was so poignant to my life. It was at a time of such vulnerability. Everyone, we then built rituals around cooking with the oven. I literally cooked in the oven in my garden every night, and like 2 or 3 times a week we would have friends over for pizzas, and it just completely changed my social dynamic. And it probably saved my life, man. It gave me purpose. It gave me a foundation for my recovery. It gave me a focus and a light, and it changed everything.
So tell me how you go from that to ultimately making let's call it a good product available to the world so other people could kind of enjoy the magic that you were able to experience with your community.
Yeah, so started getting requests from friends that were at the pizza events to build ovens in their parents' house. And so I built a couple of these hand-built brick ovens. I'd improved the aesthetic by that point, so it was like, it was something worth looking up by that point. But quite quickly realized when I was building, I think my third oven in my brother-in-law's garden, I was building it at my sister's house for my brother-in-law. We were tiling his oven, and it was like, have to share this with more people. This process of cooking with fire and community and connection. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. The cooking was different, but also the way that people connected around it was different. And so Jeff said to me, he was just like, bro, like this is it for you. This is what you need to do. And it was like, and that was where the sort of light bulb moment happened. The penny dropped, and quite quickly realized that building hand built brick ovens that took me sort of a week to 10 days to build wasn't a scalable business for me. So I then threw myself into research around, I researched every single company in the world selling a pizza oven. I researched the material compositions of refractories. I learned about refractory based aggregates and silica and alumina content in cement. And I learned about how the porosity of clays made pizzas cook. I just literally deep dived into it for like 3-4 months, threw myself in. And that was the one thing with me, man. It was like, that's one thing I learned. I'm dyslexic, but if I'm a man on a mission with a keen interest to solve something, I can read about the most boring topics in the world and be fascinated, and that's essentially, that was what I did. I threw myself into understanding how to produce products. And then, after 3-4 months of research, I'd sort of decided what the core fundamentals were for designing my first ever product. Had to be able to be shipped from a supplier. I knew the way I wanted it to look. I knew the way I wanted it to function. I got a $5,000 loan from my mum, and our first ever product it almost looked like it had a 2-foot internal cooking space, and it looked like a little concrete igloo. And that was basically it. I'd spent £2,000 on a fiberglass mold, which you turned upside down. You filled it through the footprint of the oven, through the dome, and that was it. Our first products were essentially a one-piece sort of high heat concrete dome with a 2-part base. And I found a manufacturer in the north of England that I'd asked if he would fill my molds for me, and he agreed to. He said that he would ship the products on a pallet to the customer. And so I built a fulfillment center in our spare bedroom. I started manufacturing the sort of stainless steel doors for the ovens with a local fabricator. I was going down to our local hardware store, buying the handles for the doors and screwing each handle on individually to each door. It was real grassroots, and I suppose at that point I was so determined, so much, conviction to do something and build something to protect my recovery, but also build purpose in my life and be successful, that I was just like, fire was lit within me quite literally when I built that fire in the garden. And it was just, it was like my calling, man. It was my purpose.
In 2016, I believe it was, and maybe there was an earlier one, but the one I know about is in 2016, you did an Indiegogo campaign, raised $1 million. Was that the moment? Was your Indiegogo campaign the moment that you knew this could be like a very meaningful business, or did that come later on?
Yeah, so that was like a turning point for the brand, right? We built the Stone Bake Oven Company before we got to Indiegogo with Roccbox, which was essentially the world's first ever portable stone oven, right? You know, like they didn't exist in the world at that point. And if you go online today, you know, there's hundreds of brands doing them. You know, like the innovation that we drove into a small portable stone floored oven has changed the market entirely, which I'm super proud of. But yeah, we had the Stone Bake Oven Company, which were large concrete ovens, but I quickly realised that there was no scalability outside of the UK with them. They cost a fortune to ship. You know, you couldn't really ship them into Europe. Even though it made wood-fired cooking accessible to the market, they were still heavy to install. You had to build a foundation in your garden or get a stand and all of that stuff. And so I we then subsequently, after the Stone Bake Oven Company, moved into the commercial sector, and I had an opportunity to supply a local hotel chain that's grown into a very big hotel chain now, a commercial wood-fired oven. And so we'd innovated in the space with commercial wood-fired ovens, and we became the UK market leader for professional wood-fired ovens. Always with this recipe, Alex, of incredible engineering, so the products worked brilliantly, the highest quality on the market, and the prettiest aesthetic, subjectively, in my opinion, right? And that was like the sort of ethos for design. And we became the commercial oven market leader in the UK. But whilst we were doing that, I saw an opportunity to deliver the wood-fired experience to the masses, make it even more accessible, right, than the products that we made originally. And so it was a combination of being able to scale a business outside of the UK and make it much easier for people to be able to invite this lifestyle into their homes. And so we went on a journey to design a product that could get delivered to your doorstep in a box, that you could take out, that you could fire up quickly in 20 minutes and have the same wood-fired experience without necessarily the hassle of having to build a fire or know how to interact with fire. And so the idea for Roccbox was born in sort of 2012, 2013. And then we spent 3 years developing it to make it work like a professional oven. Core challenge that you've got with any portable lightweight stone oven is the way stone ovens work is they absorb heat from a fire, they store that heat, and they re-radiate it, which is why they stay hot. And when you're trying to design a product that's got to be less than sort of 45 pounds, you don't have the ability to have a ton of thermal mass built within the product. So it took us a while to make the product truly perform like a stone oven. But yeah, when we launched on Indiegogo, we had sort of sub $5,000 budget for launching, and we had a $100,000 target. When we launched it, we hit that in 6 hours when we launched on Indiegogo. And then within 4 days, we'd done $600,000 in sales. Within the month, we did $1.2 million in sales. It was crazy success, and it started a movement. And it was wild, man. The business, at that very moment, the business was transformed to it was almost like a cottage industry business in the UK, to then being like, shit, we've got the ability to seriously disrupt the outdoor cooking market, to build a global brand. And it was a real moment for me and for the business.
When you're in your late teens, you know, you're in the throes of addiction. You've just been in that fight with this group of guys. You've picked your teeth up off the ground. You've gone to the hospital. Let's say you're sitting in the waiting room in the hospital, and now the Tom of today, so you right now, go and sit next to yourself that's sitting in the hospital in that moment, and you feel lost, you feel self-conscious, you don't know what your abilities are. What would you say to yourself that's sitting right next to you?
Yeah, I mean, $64 million question, right? Do you know what? You know, I know I paused, but there's just 3 words that really resonate with me, and my mum shared them with me when I was a kid, and she's always empowered me. And it's something that I truly believe in now, that absolutely anything is possible, right? No matter what vision that you have, you can do anything that you set your mind to. And I think for me, going from addiction to getting clean, to building an oven, to building a business, to building my family, and having such a rich, emotionally rich life now, knowing that you could do anything that you set your mind to, and inspiring someone for change, I think is interesting. I thought I was shit at everything when I was young. I just thought I was shit. And so having self-belief to be able to go out and think anything is possible. If I want to build a business, I can. Doesn't matter about my qualifications. Doesn't matter about pieces of paper that signify that I've done something. That shit helps, right? It helps you shortcut. And it helps you learn stuff that makes the journey a bit easier. But it doesn't mean you can't do it because you haven't got those. And then the ability to speak out and get help and be heard, I think is really important. And that was really the reason recently that I've shared my story, and it's the reason that I'm on this podcast, right? And it's the reason that people like you exist with your missions to remove the stigmatism of being able to speak out and to protect yourself and be able to build a future. So I would say, sharing when you're vulnerable, sharing when you're fucked, sharing when you can't cope, trying to drive change, opening your mouth and saying that I'm not okay is completely okay, right? And taking that first big step to drive change, I think, is something that I probably wish I'd done sooner when I was in the throes of addiction.
Tom Gozney, thank you so much for joining Imposters.
Thanks, man.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments your favorite part of this episode, and also what guest you would love to see on Imposters moving forward. And finally, like and subscribe so you get content from this show every single week. I'll see you guys next time.